What exactly is snooping, and what's the practical implication of it when it comes to building, or at the end of the day, possibly destroying a long-term relationship? Stick around and let's chat about it today on this episode of Christian Date Coach. Let's hit it. What's up, everybody? My name is Dr. Phoenix Singh. It is a pleasure to be here with you as always. It's a real blessing to have you in the audience. Today we're going to be chatting a little bit about the phenomenon of snooping. What exactly is it? How does it pervade modern relationships? And how is it something that at the end of the day can really destroy what may otherwise be a firm foundation of a long-term relationship? As always, we appreciate your time in viewing this video. Please do subscribe to our channel if you enjoy our content. Like this video. Comment below, especially if you enjoy the video. It really helps us out in terms of the YouTube algorithm. Share the video with your friends and with your congregation. And also below, please do feel free to follow me on these social media accounts. So what exactly do I mean when it comes to the term snooping? So to be honest with you, whenever I think about the word snooping, what I think about is, kind of like a really old school detective. Like, most of you watching this, maybe you're not old enough to remember the Pink Panther movies, right? But I remember the Pink Panther movies. And, some guy or whatever wandering around, with a big magnifying glass, weird little hat, right? Almost Sherlock Holmes, kind of going around and looking for things, right? Kind of snooping around is the idea, right? So contemporary snooping isn't necessarily going through, let's say, the papers on somebody's desk, going through their drawers, etc., even though that may be something that does happen. More what I'm talking about here is digital snooping. So specifically secretly viewing a partner's texts, their emails, maybe going through their social media account to be able to try to find some kind of incriminating evidence. And this is something that happens far too often these days, and it's one of the major pains in the butt when it comes to technology. So to be able to make a few comments on this for the sake of our chat today. So the first one is that when you take a look at neurological studies over the past 15 years, what you see is that the part of the brain that specifically has to do with the generation of verbal speech, right? So not internal monologues, not writing things, etc., right? So not kind of written production of text, but actually speaking to other human beings. It is literally getting weaker. Now, it is the case that in terms of our ability to actually, write things, communicate, and also to be able to not just generate things like text messages, but to be able to understand the written word, right? Those parts of the brain are actually getting stronger. But the general trend, especially amongst younger generations, is that the parts of the brain that have to do with vocal production are actually getting weaker. And this to me is absolutely fascinating. And at the end of the day, I'm a big believer that the one thing that our culture is lacking right now in the West is a deeper focus on communication, a deeper focus on contact in general, face-to-face communication. At the end of the day, right now there's a television series that's on right now about the US called the United States Stress. And I can tell you, living in the Washington, D.C. area, almost everyone that I know has this feeling of being overworked, underpaid. People are working all hours of the night. They're working on weekends. They're working in the evenings, especially the single individuals that I know who are in their late 20s, early 30s, just so incredibly overwhelmed trying to build their lives. And my friends who are married, my friends who are in long-term relationships, also struggling to be able to find a sufficient amount of time to be able to spend with their partner. So even when it comes to these, serious relationships, it can be such a challenge to be able to not only find the physical time, but the emotional time to be able to kind of reset, right? To be able to code switch from being in work mode to being kind of in more relaxed mode, etc., right? Now, it's not just text messaging, of course, though, right? We've also got emails. Social media is one of these things that, when you take a look at meta-analyses, a meta-analysis is a review of individual studies within a research literature where you quantitatively synthesize them and get higher level findings. And virtually all the meta-analyses point to negative effects of social media. Like all of them. Rates of depression, rates of anxiety, feelings of loneliness, you name it, social media has got it for you. I definitely recommend for people to be able to cut down on their social media use if they can, especially younger generations. phones and really kind of reset and focus on face-to-face interactions. This is something that's a huge challenge, and most of us, especially in this day and age, feel so much more comfortable communicating through things like text messages and emails. It's funny because there's a series of focus groups that were done asking men and women, what do they think about, actually making phone calls to people who maybe they're interested in dating. So let's say you want to call somebody to ask them on a first date, or you just had a lovely first date, you're calling them a couple days later to be able to set up the next one. If that's the case, so when you ask women, right, who just had a great date with a guy, what they think if the guy calls them, if focus groups of women are just like, what the heck is going on? Why is this guy calling me? Right? It's like a really odd thing. They have a hard time. But the thing is that they self-report really enjoying getting phone calls, right? But they do not enjoy picking up. Right? They'll let you leave a voice message, and then essentially they'll pour over and be thinking about the content of the voice message, right? This is what focus group research suggests. So it's one of these things where actually picking up the phone and calling somebody is such kind of a foreign experience, right? But this is really how we communicate, and especially now in terms of not just the advent, but the massive proliferation of online dating, both in terms of websites as well as things like swipe-based apps like Tinder, Bumble, etc., Hinge. You end up seeing that people are kind of adapting themselves to a different kind of communication, right? It's so funny because older generations, I'll speak, for example, with my father, so he's almost 70. I'll speak with him about this in terms of his emails, because you read his emails and I'll tell him, I'm like, sometimes, the way that you word things, your punctuation, etc., comes across a little aggressive. My father's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I just said a 2-sentence little thing. I said, I know, but it reads really blunt, etc. Maybe you should add this, that, or the other thing. And, for that older generation, it's a real challenge to be able to see what young people see, which is where there's this entire separate layer of communication, because we don't have the nonverbals, right? The 3 channels of nonverbal communication, right? Which are your paralanguage, right? So your intonation, your timbre, etc. in terms of your voice, right? Your inflection. And then your facial affect, and then also your gestural affect. We basically have none of that. So people rely on emojis, they rely on different kinds of punctuation. So, some people may, say an exclamation mark, oh, it's too intense, too much energy. And it's like, oh my goodness, it's just a text message, chill out. Right? But people really read into these things. And of course, because there's a written trail, it makes it a lot easier for people to pour over this information for such an incredibly long amount of time, right? And then when it comes to social media, it's the same thing. Those posts are around forever, right? Putting photos up, putting videos up, etc. People project onto this kind of content. And especially when it comes to social media, of course, it's this comparison culture. We see everybody else living what, we perceive to be these more idyllic lives rather than themselves. And at the end of the day, we keep saying, the grass is greener over there. And I find this happening with a lot of my single friends as well in the church, in terms of them saying, well, here's all these couples events, and, there's, different Christian small groups specifically for married couples, etc., or, marriage prep classes and these things. There's all these services, these things, for married couples, or, people who are pregnant, having babies, etc. I'm missing out. I want that. It's all over social media, etc., right? At the end of the day, though, the grass is not greener on the other side. The grass is greener where we water it, right? Not only in terms of our effort, but also in terms of our attention. If we're spending all of our attention on somebody else's life, on everybody else's life, we're going to feel so much lonelier, and we're going to feel like essentially we don't have as many blessings as other people. And this is simply not only nonsense, but it's also being quite ungrateful to God in terms of the different things that He's actually granted us in terms of our own lives. It can be really hard to see that sometimes, but I really do believe that social media is quite toxic in that regard, and I really don't like using the term toxic for anything, but I don't know what else to call it when it comes to social media, right? But sometimes what happens is that in some cases, we get this sense, right? And it could be just, some, internal, dialogue we're having with ourselves in terms of saying, oh, my partner hasn't been paying as much attention to me, or they're going out with their friends more, or, I saw them, so for example, my phone's here, right? For example, it's like, oh, I saw, them look at their text or whatever, and then kind of put the phone down as if they didn't want me to see what was kind of going on, or, he's answering emails late at night, or he was Skyping with somebody somebody and I thought I heard, the voice of a member of the opposite sex or whatever, on the other line, and they were laughing with each other. And when I asked him about it or asked her about it, they kind of skirted the issue, whatever it is. And essentially, there's this drive, this pull to kind of find out what's going on, right? And in some cases, we perceive it to be harmless. The idea of, our partner, let's say that they're, in the other room, or, they've gone to the bathroom or to the toilet, like at dinner. So like they're gone, they left their phone or whatever there, and it starts beeping, and, you think it's harmless to just check so that when they come back, you can say, oh, Toby was texting you, whatever it is. Or their social media account or whatever, it's open on your computer or whatever, they had logged in, when you open it at work and you're just like, well, she's got 17 messages, or he's got, 20 new, comments on a recent Instagram post of his. I want to take a look at, who's commenting on things, and, did anybody slide from there into, his DMs or whatever it is. But this is something that you should never do, right? Relationships, at the end of the day, you can conceptualize them as houses, right? The beams of a house cannot be too far apart or too close together, right? The structure of the house will not be able to be as strong unless it's essentially evenly spaced at kind of a good clip, okay? And so what happens is that when we kind of get involved, like over-involvement, we almost have this, dependency, codependency with our partner. That is such a toxic element, right? Again, using toxic. It is very unhealthy in terms of a psychological dynamic that you are creating with your partner, because relationships are meant to be founded on trust at the end of the day. And if it's something where the trust ends up being broken, even if you perceive, and I'm telling you right now, I do understand, right? Even if you perceive that, your partner ended up, breaking your trust first because maybe he, didn't show up, he stood you up on a date, he claimed he didn't remember, but he was, out with his friends, whatever it is, then you saw photos and there was a bunch of girls in the photos and you don't know who they are, and, you're getting nervous about it, whatever it happens to be. The correct way to deal with these things is just, calm, cool, and collected, and open communication style, right? Boundary setting, communicating those boundaries, respecting your partner's boundary, and vice versa, but having communication about it. The right thing is never to do something in secret when it comes to relationships. We as Christians, we're very deeply called to be able to, golden rule, right? Treat other people as we desire to be treated ourselves. And that is incredibly difficult. That seems like something that should be really easy. It is an immense challenge, right? It is something that literally is like picking up a cross and carrying it with us the rest of our lives. We'll never be able to do it as effectively as Christ did, right? But the only thing that we can really do is strive to do that. And if you can't do it with your romantic partner, how are you going to do it with anybody else? If you can't try to be unconditionally loving, you won't be. All love is conditional. It is, right? Only God's love is unconditional. But if you are going to, at the end of the day, make that effort to be unconditionally loving and supportive and trusting of one human being on this earth, it should be your romantic partner. And this is whether you're, not yet married, whether you're engaged, whether you've been married for 15 years, it doesn't matter, right? That should be your person, as they say, right? And the amount of trust that is broken when it comes to secretly viewing, text, email, social media accounts, etc., it can destroy the fabric of a relationship. You could say, yeah, but they did such and such first. But let me tell you, that is a childish excuse to be able to say, yeah, but they did it first. Are we in kindergarten? Right? Are we in kindergarten? Seriously, right? You cannot say things like that. Even though I do understand it, if you don't think that's childish, you need to check yourself, okay? And unfortunately, when it comes to focus group findings and research, when it comes to asking people about snooping, there's really two themes that emerge. The first, which to me is very concerning, is the theme of, well, if you leave your accounts logged on, then it's fair game. Oh my gosh. That's ridiculous. You need to change your attitude if that's what you think. If you genuinely believe that if your partner, is still signed into Facebook or Instagram or whatever, on your phone, on, your computer, whatever it is, and that means that it's okay for you to hop on there and look through everything on there, you're out of your mind and you need to grow up and you need to emotionally mature. That is incredibly inappropriate. It's just unbelievable to me that anybody would do that. Snooping around on your partner's computer, looking for things, etc. It is so inappropriate, right? And there's two things here, right? Number one, which is very likely, is that nothing is going on. Okay, there's this thing at the end of the day. There's a lot of words for it. It's cognitive bias. Some people call it the illusion of power, the illusion of influence. The idea is the more that we think about something, the more likely it is to occur. This happens with playing the lottery, right? So, buying lottery tickets. It's almost like, if I carry the ticket with me, if I think about winning, I just have to zone in, think about it, then it's more likely to happen. No, it's not, right? It's the same thing in terms of flipping a quarter over and over and over again, right? And you say, well, if I just, focus, heads, okay, then it'll be heads. No, it's not, right? That's not a thing, right? This is a probabilistic game that we're basically playing when it comes to, gambling like playing the lottery, or gambling like flipping a coin. It's 50-50 probability no matter how many times you flip that coin, okay? So it is one of these things where the likelihood is that if you get an idea in your head, right? It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, doesn't matter, right? If you get the idea in your head and you ruminate about it enough, you are going to convince yourself and start looking for proof. It's called confirmation bias, looking for proof of what you already have in your head, right? You are out of your mind if you believe that you are immune to cognitive biases like this. It is not true. So the big issue that we have here is that you're going to convince yourself this is the case, and then you're going to do something and believe that you're justified in doing it, right? You're not going to be respectful of boundaries or of your partner's privacy. And at the end of the day, what you're going to do is go into their accounts, etc. The likelihood is that you're not going to find anything, right? You could also find something that's totally meaningless and just be convinced that this is evidence of something, right? And then what are you going to do? The likelihood is you're going to, call your partner, sit down with your partner or whatever, and say, I was looking through your accounts, and I found this thing. Who is this person? You said this. These sorts of things are just so incredibly inappropriate. It is the most childish form of communication ever, okay? And the other theme when it comes to focus group findings is that this kind of snooping leads to suspicion and paranoia, which could break the fundamental trust that's needed to maintain a relationship. To be honest with you, if I were to ever find out that my partner is snooping through my things and this kind of stuff, instead of just trusting that I'm not doing anything that would harm the relationship, then we don't have a relationship in the first place. If the person's looking at search histories, is trying to get onto my Facebook or my YouTube account or whatever it is, it's going to be a huge problem, right? The level of trust that's there, which you've probably worked for months if not years to be able to develop, will be shattered in a single instance. And you have to ask yourself whether that's worth it or not, or whether you can trust your partner enough that if you have an honest conversation with them, if they're going to be honest with you, and if you don't trust them in that honest sit-down form of calm, cool, and collected discussion, right? How on earth are you going to have a relationship with them? Okay, if you were going to respond to this video and tell me something along the lines of, well, you know what, I just can't trust him. He wouldn't tell me the truth. She wouldn't tell me the truth. I had to do it. Well, you didn't have a relationship in the first place then. Okay, you didn't have a relationship, right? You had somebody else that hypothetically you were dating, or hypothetically you were engaged to, hypothetically you were married to, right? But those are arbitrary labels. A relationship is based on actions and not words, right? I am not saying that your partner in this particular case has no fault whatsoever, okay? That is not what I'm saying. All of us are so incredibly fallible, right? I fail at being a good partner every single day. I'm just confident of it. I fail at being a good son. I certainly fail at being a good Christian. It's just without a doubt, if you really think that you're so infallible, I mean, again, you really got to check yourself. It's not okay, right? But the right thing to do here is to be able to have an honest conversation. If that doesn't go well, you may have to relook at your relationship, right? Or maybe go seek Christian counseling. I'm a huge believer in that, in terms of having people that you know, like, and trust in the faith who are, at the same place or further on in their walk with Christ, to be able to sit down and actually have a really good conversation and to be able to get some assistance. But the right thing to do is never to do this snooping nonsense, okay? the fact that people actually do this consistently blows my mind, so I really wanted to do a video on it. I had a friend of mine tell me the other day that he found his Facebook logged in to a really old message, right? It wasn't from an ex or anything like this. It was just a really kind of old message or whatever, right? From some old work colleague of his who, yes, absolutely was a woman, right? But, completely innocent of these things, talking about work and this kind of stuff. But, opened up his computer when he got to the office or whatever and logged in, and that was the first screen that kind of came up. And the message was from a year ago. So, I mean, there's no way that he was going in there and looking at stuff. And so he sat down or whatever and asked his partner about it. And, sure enough, she came clean and said that she was feeling really, really anxious about this situation because she was just about to meet his parents for the first time. And yeah, had thrown her into a bit of a tizzy, and she was, really, really anxious and was this was getting really, really serious for her. And so because of that, she wanted to, make sure, because in the past she had a partner who had done something like this in terms of been chatting with other women online, which is just awful, right? Terrible things. Relationships can be so tragically difficult, right? But at the end of the day, the frustration or whatever that he felt was massive. That said, right, obviously, because they had a cool, calm, and collected discussion about it, right, she, admitted it and apologized, etc. Obviously, I wish that it hadn't been something where, she wouldn't have mentioned anything unless he had found out that that was the case, right, that this had been done. I really don't think that that's okay, right? If you've done this, I do think always in a relationship you should fess up to anything like this where it has the potential down the line to kind of blow up, right? Because it's one of these things that the best thing to do is always to tell the truth. Mark Twain had a great line. It's something along the lines of always tell the truth. This way you don't have to remember your lies. And I do really believe in that as well when it comes to relationships. So those are my thoughts on the modern phenomenon of digital snooping. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. As always, it's a real blessing to have you with me. As I mentioned earlier, please do. It helps us a lot on the YouTube algorithm. If you like this video, share it with your friends, with your congregation. Also, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell so you get notifications every time we post new original content. Follow us on social media, and if you're interested in coaching one-on-one with me, or if you're interested in having me come and speak to your congregation, it would be an absolute blessing to be able to do that at your place of worship. Please go ahead and feel free to contact me via the website below. All right, folks, thank you so much again for stopping by. Don't forget to get out there, take chances, and be your best self, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you enjoyed that episode and you'd like to see more original content, then please do click on one of the links right here. I hope to see you in the next one.